Hey everyone, my name is Michael. I started this company called DB and what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Say you wanted to know about every Web3 project that exists today. You could try and do it yourself, but you could also try and create an economic incentive for everyone to contribute the 10 projects that they know about and contribute those into a shared data set. And so that's kind of the idea. Is we want to DB wants to try and create really, really large data sets for people, almost like a Wikipedia, but then also incentivize people to do that. So I'm going to talk about how this system is built and some use cases around how it's done. But that's sort of the idea, is basically paying people to contribute high quality data to data sets. So what does it look like on the back end? To the user, it looks very similar to an Airtable type experience. And users come along and enter into the database. Let's go with this example of a butterfly. So say we wanted to collect butterflies from around the world and see where, and collate them together. So in our database, we would have a data set of butterfly species and where they were from. And when you submit the data, it actually ties the butterfly that you've entered to your wallet address. Now that wallet address then knows where that piece of data came from. And what's cool is it actually mints an NFT with the butterfly that you submitted to this data set to that thing. And this is really interesting because now we've collected this large data set, and it's actually not just a data set of just rows in a database. It's actually a collections of NFTs that sit on chain. And so when you go to your wallet address, when you go to your wallet and you open it up, or you go to OpenSea with your wallet address, you actually can see all the pieces of data that you've contributed to a data set. Now we typically think of NFTs as being just images, but in this case what we're doing is we're storing in the NFT a JSON object, and this JSON object has to conform to a set standard that is by the curator of a data set. So what sort of projects are we working with? So we're working with HairDAO now. So there's this new concept of decentralized science, which is sort of how do you use the blockchain to better scientific outcomes? So in science, a lot of data is found to be not replicable. A lot of data is found to not known where the origin is for it. Some data it can't be traced back to a provenance to a person. So what's cool about putting data on the blockchain and creating data sets on the blockchain is the blockchain solves a lot of these problems almost naturally. Okay, so what's interesting is with the data on the blockchain, you can actually track it back to where it came from initially. So an example of this is we're working with HairDAO. And HairDAO has this insight that clinical trials as they're done today are very expensive and can't be done very well because they have to go through the FDA, and there's a lot of problems with it. And HairDAO's insight was that there's all these Reddit communities out there where people are trying to solve this problem, but they don't know exactly, but they don't have any sort of structured way of solving this issue. So HairDAO goes out to the hair loss community on Reddit and says, hey, we want to sort of support you in trying these new drugs out, and you tell us how they work for you. And then so we're working with HairDAO to collect all that data of how these different drugs work for different people and put them into a data set. We're also working with this company called Altaflora, and they are also doing a distributed clinical trial where parents are trying to figure out how well CBD works for their kids who have epilepsy. Now, this isn't something that the FDA would normally be able to do, but because we're sort of doing it outside the guise of the normal sort of rails, we are giving the ability for parents to mint NFTs with how well CBD works for various, fixing some of these epilepsies that their children have. And then we can compile that into a data set and then take that data set and sell it to researchers or sell it to pharmaceutical companies. And what's cool is then when we take that money, we then split it up and give it to all the people that contributed data. So if there was 100 people in a data set and we sold it for sold the data for $100,000 to a pharmaceutical company, each patient would basically get $1,000 reward for their data that they contributed. And this is cool because we don't have to build all the infrastructure. So why are we using the blockchain to do this? Is we don't have to build all the infrastructure to make these types of systems work. We're able to sort of build it on top of the blockchain. The other thing that's really interesting is, say a row in a data set is monetizing very well. It's every time the data set is sold, somebody gets a portion of that data. Because it's all this data is all tokenized, you can just go to OpenSea and you see the row in the data set that has an NFT, and someone else might want to buy it. So someone says like, oh, I see this token is generating like $1,000 a month. I will offer you $10,000 to own that token. And so then you can just transfer that token, and someone else is now the owner of that monetizing row in the data set. The other companies, the other thing we're doing, I wanted to talk about very briefly is I run NFTs.NYC. So we had an event last night, actually, where we had the author of the NFT standard. But it's a monthly meetup, and you're all encouraged to come. You can find out more about it by looking at our Twitter. It's DBDAO, DB, D as in dog, B as in boy, DAO, .xyz. Or you can follow us on Twitter, and we post about all the information there. Does anyone have any questions? I'll take a breather for questions. Okay, well, I have some other stuff I can talk about is like, why do we want to build a database on the blockchain? So one of the things that's really cool about building it, like how does a database built on the blockchain differ from a database that's built like a traditional Postgres or MySQL database? One is all the data in a database on a Web3 database, like what we've built here, is immutable. So no database admin can go in and change a row or a column in this data set because it's all put on chain. Another good benefit is like all the data has provenance. So a lot of times you want to know where the data came from. Say someone's contributing a lot of data, or a machine is contributing a lot of data to a data set, and it's later found out to be miscalibrated or something. What you can do here is you can just look to see where the data came from and automatically invalidate it or do whatever you need to do. The other thing is like, how does this database differ from a traditional database? Is a Web3 database is really built around the concept of incentives. So you're incentivized, because this data is being sold, you're incentivizing people to contribute data. Whereas in a traditional database, like a Facebook or Instagram, you sort of lob your data over the fence, and then that's the last you've ever see of it. Here, all the data is stored in your wallet, and you're able to, you get rewards for it based on how well it monetizes natively, and how well it monetizes, which is something that really can't be done in a normal database. And then lastly, it's permanent. So a lot of times data is lost in academic settings. Maybe a researcher or a PhD student graduates and the server dies. Here, with DBDAO, we store all the data on IPFS and on the blockchain, on Avalanche. So that data will be around as long as those types of, that infrastructure is around. And even if, so that's another sort of benefit. All right, so it looks like we're out of time. So if there's any one last question, I'm happy to take it, or we can pass it on to the next person. But thank you, guys.